You're not wrong.
Welcome. Well, welcome to the 2-month review. This is Chad Bose from Open Letter Books, and we are here, as always, every week in which we take a long, difficult book, break it down section by section, talk about it, analyze it, have jokes, have fun. I'm joined, as always, with Brian Wood.
Hi, Chad.
Screwed up the whole intro.
I know I did. I was late. Sorry. I was swallowing. I was very carefully swallowing my saliva so I wouldn't choke on it. Has that ever happened to you before? Where like the closest I've ever come to death is inhaling my own spit, and I was trying not to do that just then. So,
that's good. Don't die.
That was my fault.
Don't die on the podcast. That's probably an FCC violation.
Yeah.
If we were to broadcast you live.
So hi, good to be here.
Good. Okay. Yeah. We're talking about Radiant Terminus, and we're talking about Radiant Terminus by Antoine Bulladine this week with Rachel Crawford. Welcome, Rachel.
Hey.
Rachel is the guest who was supposed to be on last week, but we had a quote unquote conflict in which there was, I forget if your car had been broken at that time or like,
yeah,
it was. Okay. Cause I thought it was the day before and we're like, this is going to be chaotic. Let's reschedule everything.
Yeah, I was traveling. Yeah. It was crazy.
So thankfully you're able to come on this week, but then I know that you listened to the last episode and have a beef to pick with Brian, who started a conflict, a legit conflict.
Yeah, controversy finally.
It's not even real beef because he's not entirely wrong about what he said. It was just funny in the context of like, oh, you had said, Chad, oh, we had a conflict with the guest, and Brian was like, that makes it sound like you guys are fighting, or there's an actual issue with the guest, and then he brought up later that New Jersey is hell, and one big tar pit of pepperoni and cologne or something.
Yeah, pepperoni and cologne.
It is that way in the summer because all the New Yorkers come down and fuck it up. But before that, it's not.
Just to make it clear, Rachel is from New Jersey.
She's from New Jersey.
New Jersey. I have seen you almost claw a woman's eyes out about a New Jersey comment.
Yeah, I mean, I just grew up in like a shitty Irish town in New Jersey, like a shitty white Irish town. So it's like, I don't know, it didn't fit any of the Jersey stereotypes. No accents, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I look like a Guido, but most of the people I grew up with didn't. So
Is it okay to say Guido? Is that
if you say it about yourself, right?
She can say it, but you can't say it.
Right? That's how that works.
Okay.
Probably not.
Sounds like a plan. So, Rachel, tell us a bit about yourself. You are a master's student here at the University of Rochester. You've been an intern at Open Letter, where I believe your nickname was Paranoid Sarah.
Yeah.
that was the summer when we had all the Sarahs and like Quantum Sarah and other Sarah that I can't remember what it was, and then you were Paranoid Sarah.
Yeah.
And you went through and have been working a lot with the different translators here in town. But why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? Introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, so I just actually this week finished up my master's degree. My thesis is all set, good to go.
Congratulations!
Congratulations! Shots!
We will.
Okay.
For always, anyway.
10:15 in the morning first. We got to wait 4 more minutes.
Okay, fair enough. What else about me? My thesis was about, I'm interested in madness in literature and how it's projected onto specifically marginalized groups.
Oh.
So like the projection of madness, not actual madness. So that kind of happens a little bit in Radiant Terminus, right?
Yeah.
Which we can get to. So I focused on Quentin Compson in The Sound and the Fury as like a non-binary character. Now, I didn't want to diagnose him as gender confused or that he identifies in a certain way, but just as a non-binary character and how his sexuality, contributed to his madness.
Cool. Very cool. And how did you get interested in reading international books? Because I know you read a lot of them and have been very active in our little local community.
Yeah, so I when I was doing my undergrad, or even when I was in high school, I really liked, I started with a fascination with like Edgar Allan Poe. And Edgar Allan Poe's, obviously an American writer, but, he was really rejected by Americans and was loved by the Russians. And he was my favorite author growing up. And then I kind of branched out into Russian literature. And then I met you, Chad, in gosh, I think it was like 2011 or 2012 or something. And
that's
when
that's when the cutting started.
The cutting?
And then I met you, Chad, and then it all went down.
And then I ended up in New Jersey.
Yeah, and then I, realized that there was this this movement that you were behind of exposing more people to literature and translation. And I think a lot of Americans, like I did, really start off with translated literature, looking to Russia and the Russian Golden Age specifically. And there's a lot of that in there's.
Were you did you find yourself drifting towards Russian because was it similar to like the melancholy you found in Poe?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Like then, like, oh, this is what real melancholy is like. Poe is a pussy. Like these people are fucked up.
Yeah. I loved Gogol. I loved the dark, melancholic writing that was also funny. Like Chekhov and Gogol, Pushkin. So. Russians have a really dark sense of humor. So
I have a funny story for you that's actually it's like a teaser, I suppose. So there's a podcast that'll go up tomorrow morning, in which I talked to Edwin Frank from the New York Review of Books, and he recounts this anecdote about Alan Lane from Penguin, that one of the famous publishers of Penguin Classics. And at one point in time, they asked him like how many copies they would print of the different volumes of War and Peace, and he's like, print 30,000 copies of Volume 1 and 19 of Volume 2. Because no one's gonna make it that far.
Wow.
Like people are only gonna buy the first one.
So I'm curious, and maybe both of you can maybe answer this question obviously much better than I can. I'm not extremely well versed with Russian lit. I mean, I've done like the stuff you're supposed to read, basically. Like if there was a greatest hits album, I've probably done like 8 of the 12 or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. With this being a French author, how is he doing, do you think, as far as trying to getting in that vein of like a Russian experience in a novel? Because like it has like those kind of like dreary, like gray notes that you get in a lot of Russian literature, and it still has the humor there as well. Do you think it's ringing true for you guys, or is there some misses to it?
Yeah, I think that there are some definite influences, at least, going on. Specifically, I was thinking of Dostoevsky's Poor Folk, when Kronor is grieving his ex-lover. I can't decide or like understand if she's actually his wife or not, but his ex-lover.
The lover was Irina, the one that gets, they break in and kill while she's dying and rape her body. And then Vasilisa was just like his friend. Yeah.
But okay, so Irina wasn't actually his wife, but either way, his lover, her, when he's grieving her death, he goes on for several paragraphs, and that sense of grief reminds me of this this scene in Poor Folk where this man is running after his son's dead body in the casket after the. You kind of get the same tone in this this just really exacerbated grief. So I saw a little bit of Dostoevsky in there, and then I feel like Gogol's pretty present as well, with some of the absurdity that's going on, like you would find in The Nose or The Overcoat, right? But these are probably things that like you've read, Brian, so I don't know if I'm bringing up any like arcane.
No. I think everything. I'm so naive for the most part. Everything is great for. I soak it all in. I also get some of the shadings of. I don't know how I got stuck reading this book in one of my literature classes. Probably because nobody else. I think we had a long time ago in high school. There was like a reading list, an advanced reading list, and I was late to sign up for it. So there was like 5 books left to pick. So for whatever reason, I'm just like, I'll pick A Day in the Life of whatever his name is by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It's the most like depressing. It's about the gulag, and it's just awful. Like, I think half the book is about getting a piece of sausage to make soup. Like it's just so miserable, and I get shadings of that. Like I think he nailed the misery, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I I agree. Like there's a lot of the Russian stuff. I mean, he is Volodin is teaches Russian literature.
Okay, that makes sense then. Because I was trying to figure out how did he tap into this so well? Like I'm very envious of his ability to like be something he's not.
And I'm not 100% sure. He might because Volodin is a pseudonym or heteronym or however we're going to use it. But I think that he might have like a Slavic heritage as well.
All right.
And that might be where he's interested in that. But all the books have like, I'm trying to think through the various ones, and there's like, this is the most Russian of them in terms of both its length. Of the ones that have come out in English, the length is more Russian length, like long. But there's a lot of that, the trains, the camps, the gulags, all of it is based in the second Soviet Russia. It's supposed to be invoking like a Russian landscape and like using that, like the idea of there being like the grand radiant future that you could have of the communist utopia and like subverting that in this way. But the other ones have a little bit of that. Like Minor Angels has a lot of camp sort of stuff to it. When I remember, it's been years. But some of the others have like something else that's like not necessarily specifically Russian, but it's definitely not French either. At least not French of the current moment, where at least when he was writing these, like there's a lot of French minimalists that like Warren Mahdi writes about in a few different books, but the like Toussaint and Auster and there's like Lidie Salder, all these people who are like this specific sort of French minimalism where it was like internal monologues with that worked in like logical ways and yet would always be like lead to characters who are very bizarre and funny and weird because their thoughts would track off and like end up in a weird place. Like I think, were you in my class when we read On the Train?
No, Chad, I've never been in your class, and I'm never going to take one of your classes.
I meant Rachel. I was looking at the box in the corner here.
I'm kidding.
Which apparently is not the same as eye contact. Weird.
No, I didn't read that.
Okay, so there's this book. It was great. It's like a short little book. It's super funny about this guy who wants to go. He goes to the train station every week, and he looks for like an attractive woman who like he can try and hit on. And so he finds in this setting of this book, there's this woman who's like carrying too many bags of books and stuff, and she can't carry them all. So he goes and helps her carry on the books, and she gets off at the stop. So he's like, oh, I'm going to get off at the stop too. And she goes and checks in this hotel. So he's like, yeah, it makes total sense. This is the person I'm in love with. We're going to have this great affair. So I'm going to go stay at this hotel as well. And he's like, but now how am I going to find her? Like, I don't know how to find her. And so he thinks through like options. He's like, I could just wait here in the lobby. She has to come down sometime, but like, who knows? Maybe like if I go to the bathroom, I'll miss her, or like maybe she'll take a different exit. He's like, the best option would be to go to knock on every single door in the hotel. And when they answer, like, you're not the woman I'm looking for, or you are. And this is the best solution. And like that sort of weird brain way of like working, that sort of minimalist writing is not necessarily in Volodin. He's got much more expansive bits, but there are like hints of that at times where their minds seem to like, he encapsulates part of that, but it's not really not 100% French either.
There's like this absurdism that the Russians do so well, like Daniel Karm's.
Oh yeah.
Like Today I Wrote Nothing is just ridiculous and absurd and hilarious. It's just entirely thoughtless. Right?
It's supposed to be,
so great. The other thing that's very Russian about this novel is like I almost feel like in your typical golden age Russian novels, there's like a list of characters in the beginning because you cannot keep track of all the characters. And I was like, this book should have that because like there's so many different soldiers and there's so many. I mean, it's not as exaggerated as a Russian novel, but there are a lot of characters to keep track of.
And you get their first and last names, and they're always. And it's always the first and last name. Like it's not just so it makes it even doubly hard.
Like I'm usually the worst at keeping names straight, and this is one time that actually like I'm lucid about all of them. Like my memory is like.
I talked to you about that yesterday. Like, man, I feel like just like ugly American. Like, because unless the names are like like Susie and Bob, I can't keep these straight.
Some reason I got it down.
Arena and Adinka, and like I was like, oh, these all seem the same to me. I can't differentiate the names.
Speaking of, we haven't played this game because we haven't had a guest in a while. But Rachel, who is Yan Zhang? You have to give us your impression of who Yan Zhang would be if it weren't a post-exotic writer.
I have no idea.
That's the game. That's the game. Invent a character with the name Yan.
Oh, I'm inventing a character?
Yeah. YANNZHANG, author of Mongolian Tradition. and Theater of Harrowing Revision.
Oh, fuck, Chad, I have no idea.
And A Flag Under the Mud. That might be the best title ever, A Flag Under the Mud.
Is this is from his other book?
Yeah, in 10 lessons, there's like a list of 100 and some books by the post-exotic writers, 200 and some, maybe 300. Yeah, 343 books that are in the post-exotic tradition, and they're just all made up titles and made up characters. So I've been using the names because they're all these crazy ass names that seem to be like, this one, Yan Zhang, sounds almost like Chinese, but like...
No, but I remember Yan Zhang, if I recall, he got drafted 2 years ago in the second round from the basketball league.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, he got drafted by Orlando Magic. And he made it to the G League, but he never made it up to the pros. He flamed out, but he was like a huge star. Yan Zhang was a huge star of the Chinese basketball league. I think he led the league in blocks. He was like 6'11", but he ended up flaming out as a big man. Yan Zhang, yeah.
Bad knees.
That is a shame.
Thank you, Brian.
No problem.
No problem. I really appreciate
it. No, but I do have a question about post-exotic again, because I don't think it really, to me, it doesn't really matter like what trying to nail down the definition of what makes a book post-exotic, but what is exotic literature then? You know what I mean? Like if it's post-exotic, so is Russian exotic literature?
So I think,
or who's saying it's exotic? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is exotic literature?
For next week, since it's the last one next week, and I think it'll just be the two of us, because again, I lost my sheet of when everyone's supposed to come on here, and when my computer was stolen, so I have no idea if anyone else is supposed to be a guest.
But, computer was stolen?
What's that?
When your computer was stolen?
Yeah. That file was never backed up. So I had like a schedule of who was supposed to be a guest on which week.
It's a drinking story for when we celebrate your thesis being finished. We'll hash it out.
Okay. But we're gonna just do it. And I think what we should do is I'll revisit and I'll send it to you too, the 2-part essay that he wrote about post-exotic literature. And it might address that a little bit, but my understanding is that like it's sort of a representative for postmodernism. So in the way that like it's no longer exoticizing the characters or making artificial plots, but somehow getting through the way that they talk about post-exotic literature is that it gets through subversive messages that undermine the normal structures of power and of reality, but in ways that are too subtle to like for the censors to pick up on. Because if it was directly like combative, then they would be censored and blocked. And the post-exotic writers are supposed to like sneak these things in and disrupt the status quo through like this kind of rhizomatic like undercurrent sort of structure.
So if only this book could address power, like patriarchy, and
in there. But again, like,
and reality for that matter.
Next week, this will make a lot more sense, I think, because this will go back to that first conversation where like this is one of his pieces of this grand project. And there's other ones that sort of relate to it, like this book that's kind of talking about the post-exotic versus this being more of an example of like, and maybe not even like technically a post-exotic novel in the sense that it's talking about the post-exotic novels inside of it. But like, yeah, I think it'll make more sense in that whole frame once we finish the book too.
Okay. Well, I apologize.
Not in great detail.
Yeah, I completely hijacked the start of this just with those couple of questions, but
no, that's totally fine.
Get through your spiel. I know you wanted to like do the summary of this, and then we can get into some specific topics. But yeah, I just wanted to cover some of those bigger things real quick. We had a Russian specialist on to help me out with this junk.
So today we're supposed to talk about pages 364 through 415. It's chapters 27 through 38. We're in the taiga. Everything, the recap bit is like, at this point, if you've not been following along, I'm going to skip like the big thing. I guess what you need to know is that Solovey is a bad guy. He ran the Radiant Terminus. He invaded people's minds, including those of his daughter, and basically like mind raped them. He and Kronauer came in conflict. Kronauer was like a former soldier of the Second Soviet Union who was trying to like be good and not do the Cox language and not do rut to all the women, and help save Hanko, who wants to get out of Radiant Terminus, who's one of Solovey's abused daughters. And they come in conflict. Kronauer tries to kill Solovey. That doesn't happen. Hundreds of years pass. Solovey's stuck in Kronauer is like resuscitated because of Solovey's infinite power, in the oil pits, is brought back to life, is now wandering the taiga as well, where Hanko is living on her own, writing down things that are like post-exotic texts that she can remember from like the feminist post-exotic writers, along with her own observations, along with rewriting down all of her dad's crazy speeches. And that's basically where we pick up, because we had only read a couple chapters into this fourth part of the book for last episode. And that sort of set it up. But this one, I guess we could take these one by one again, because each one's different. These taiga, these are Naraks in this section, and they each seem to address a different character each time. There are a couple that kind of cross through, but we're getting sort of a lay of the land of like what's happened now 1,000 years in the future, you know, in this world that's now completely fallen apart. And it is explained in here that like after the night in which Kronauer went amok, the Radiant Terminus imploded and is gone, basically. And so this is like a new, like if it weren't post-apocalyptic before, it's like post-apocalyptic now. It's like on, like the shit has become more shit. So anyway, so 27 was the first one. And this is where he's like Kronauer is taking a shower, and he gets a little bit of like an update on where he is and like what's happening to him. And this is, I believe this is a section where they come in and like s07e and Grandma Ugdal like interrogate him. So he's given a sort of trial within this like sort of weird like communal bathroom, shower room sort of sequence, which is very surreal. And they're telling him all the things that he did wrong and accusing him of, which are like these horrible, crazy crimes, but aren't true. So like on 367, it's like s07e jumped from subject to subject in order to discombobulate the accused man and make it impossible for him to defend himself. Every so often, he summed up the main charges, and then he gave equal weight to blood crimes and miserable ordinary details of life in Radiant Terminus. According to him, Kronauer had intentionally half-fixed the fire hydrant in front of Miriam Ermarik's house, which had turned a large part of the main road to mud. He had unfairly taken Barguzan's shirts. When his turn had come to work in the kitchens, he prepared a porridge of toasted barley with flour and rancid butter without paying attention to the amounts, thereby repeatedly creating disgusting meals. He had hurt Samaya's head when he had brought her back from the forest the day of his arrival. Then he had tiptoed around all the women in the Kolkos with clear intention of sleeping with them and hurting them, the only exception being the Grandma Ugdal, whom he had evidently spared, but doubtless because she had brought to light his role in assassinating an officer in the Red Army, because she had unmasked him as a deserter. Among his Casanovian actions, he had persuaded Samaya Schmidt to read and reread unhealthy pamphlets written by Maria Quall and her group of Amazonians, to the point that Samaya Schmidt had lost her spirit and had gone crazy against her father. It's just amazing, like rundown of like, you made shitty soup. You caused my daughter to go Captain America or Captain Marvel on my ass.
I knew it was funny when I read it, but it's not really funny until it's read out loud.
Like
when you read it, that's hilarious. Like, one, I made mud. Two, like, wait, I'm on trial for making mud? Like, yeah, and not only mud, but the soup sucked.
Yeah. Used rancid butter in the inappropriate amount.
Casanovian tiptoeing with all the women. It's like, what?
Yeah.
You didn't even hit on Grandma Ugdal, probably because she figured you out. Like,
yeah.
It's really spectacular. Yeah, this is
Or how great would Judge Judy be if they had to be on trial while taking a shower? Just like these poor people just naked, and Judge Judy's up there, like just the absurdity of that, even, right? The fact that, because there's this wonderful line, I think, where he says he makes like the pose of a frightened naked person.
Yeah.
So like I knew exactly what that was, right? You put the leg up to hide yourself, and then you cover your private parts, right? So he's doing that pose, water coming down him, and then just like, you made bad soup. Like, it's so bizarre, this trial, right? And I think it goes perfectly with, you know, with the vein of Russian literature, like these bizarre like mock trials of just wanting to accuse somebody of something.
This is a crazy kangaroo court, like
yeah. Yeah, it works perfect.
Yeah, it's super Daniel Carms, right? Super Carms. And even with the feminist writings, like, I get that there's this paranoia also, like my Russian professors who I had, who like were from Russia, you know, all isms are bad. You know, they believe all isms are bad because all isms lead to extremism. So there's that paranoia, I think, that exists in like Soviet era Russian thought. All isms are bad. So feminism, this is what will come of feminism. And he really channeled into that really well. But yeah, all of that like absurdism is super, it's just I don't know, it's just absurd. It just, and you really find that in Russian literature, yeah.
There is, so like, I love the part too at the end where, and this is crazy. So in 369, the shame of being, this is the, I think your line, the shame of being naked like an animal in front of the judges, in front of the corpses, in front of Samaya Schmidt on her stool, and in front of Samaya Schmidt lying on the floor, her head exploded. And why would I be the one to have killed them? Kronauer asked defensively. Kill is a big word, Sylvain acknowledged, but you spent a night shooting at them with a war weapon. They weren't in good shape when we collected them. Whenever someone tried to get close and calm you, you shot them down. This went on the whole night until you were knocked out. I don't remember any of that, Kronauer said. Are they dead? You're one of ass soldier, Sylvain said angrily. What do you think you are? Which leaves him in a precarious situation, but also is awesome. Like, well, you didn't really kill them, but like every time someone came to calm you down, you just started shooting at them with a war weapon. Going amok. Running amok.
I think that's one of my favorite things too in this novel is the dialogue. The dialogue's really well done, especially Kronauer, because he's so matter of fact. And I think sometimes when writers try to do this or like to imitate like that terseness that like maybe you would find in like Hemingway or something, it just comes off as bad or almost funny when it's not supposed to be. But Kronauer is just this kind of, he's just kind of like very matter of fact, like what are you talking about? Or this is not the case, and just like highlighting their absurdity more than they are. It's really, I really like the dialogue a lot.
Like how perfect, like on 371,
yeah,
halfway down, right? Solivier says, you went into your own dreams to hurt her, Solivier said. That accusation doesn't hold up, Kronauer said. Yeah. I saw your dreams from start to finish. I went into them. You hurt her every... So the very thing he's accusing him of is like, no, I invaded your dreams. I know you invaded people's dreams. Like,
I know you were, well, it's not even that they're in dreams. He's saying that in your dreams, you did things to them. Yeah, and he's like, I don't even remember. He's like, oh, I watched you. I watched you dreaming about.
Oh, I invaded your dreams. I know that you did that. Like, what? What the hell?
I remember that. I was there. You came and went like a lecherous dog.
I don't remember my dreams.
He mixed up the woman you knew with the woman you wanted to know. Your cock trembled like a Stone Age monster.
But I remember them. Yeah, like just how bizarre that is.
It's wild. So this part, chapter 28, the trial like continues and has a great couple lines, including the one plot point that Samaya Schmidt's exiled after this. Like she's thrown out of the Radiant Terminus. She'd be expelled from the reassuring world of Radiant Terminus and would have to walk blindly for 1,608 or 2,302 years or more without help of any kind, a punishment coupled with the impossibility of any rest, whether in the world of the living or that of the dead. And then the facts motivating such a punishment were chiefly parasital attacks, incestuous intrigues, both generic and concrete, the feminist ramblings contrary to ideals of proletarian egalitarianism, conflagrations and destruction of public buildings, refusing collective morality, divulging secrets of enemies, sabotage.
Refusing collective morality.
Yeah. Refusing collective morality. Mm-hmm. Oh man. And then there's a great bit where like where he's getting accused of everything, and Kronauer's like, I didn't shoot anyone, he finally said once again. If you're gonna say shit like that, the Grandma Ugdal suddenly said angrily, you should just shut up, Kronauer. That's how you defend yourself in this court. I didn't do it. Shut up. Don't say shit.
I was expecting something really bad to happen to him in that shower. It was a really like suspenseful, intense moment for me. I thought something horrific, especially after like section that's tackled before this was the climax. So you're kind of coming down from all of that energy and violence. And I was really expecting something horrible to happen. I mean, it's not a comfortable scene by any means, but I was expecting something to happen to his person.
Yeah, especially all the nakedness and like the pleas, like, may I get dressed, and like no, like keeping him naked and under the eye.
Yeah, he's so brave up until this point where, you know, Valdine describes him as begging at that point. Yeah.
Are there any, so yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how that also relates to like the idea of trauma that runs throughout this book that we'll get to more in a second, of their lasting traumas are not always physical, but like things that have been done to them in their interior and in their selves that are like so impactful and haunt them forever, that maybe that is worse than like a physical, like not allowing him to die, essentially like being like, nope, you know, we could have killed you, we brained you, But instead, we brought you back to life so that for the next 1,000 years, you're alone. And I'm going to have fucked with your head so thoroughly that you will never feel comfortable for 1,485 years as you wander around, not dying in this wasteland.
Yeah, this is definitely something that I was thinking of reading this section that we're going over today was, you know, if I could describe it in one word, it would probably be perdition. And like when you're looking at the Bible, when I was growing up, I don't know if this is actually true or how this translates into English, but I was taught that the word torture is never used. The word torment is. So hell isn't an actual physical torturous place, but you grieve your life without God and your family and this interminable loneliness, and you can only mull over your regrets, you know, over and over forever. And that's what hell actually is. And so I was kind of thinking each of these characters goes through that in each of these narratives.
So this is like a Russian existential version of The Good Place?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
No, I think that's a wonderful point, though. Yeah, hell is it's an absence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is like his writing. A lot of this is mostly very nihilistic. You know, things are hardly what they are. If there's a darkness, it's a half darkness. If there's silence, it's an almost silence. You know, everything is barely what it is, and it's almost everything that it's not. So yeah, it's like inherently very nihilistic.
They're related to that. Chapter 29 is where he finally escapes. Like his doors just open after in years of seclusion. All of a sudden, the things open. He leaves, and there's that part where this goes back to the beginning and sort of ties in what you just said. 376, where he's like, I don't even know the names of these grasses. Cronauer suddenly realized these are new species. These are new species, but they're dead. So not only like at the beginning, he had been naming everything in this new world and being like, I don't remember the names of I dated someone who knew all the grasses and all the trees, and I don't remember them, but this is this, and it has that kind of Adam-like moment. And now there's like new grasses that are already dead that he doesn't know the name of. He's like exiled from all of that knowledge and from that world, and is very nihilistic and like over before it even is started. And then in this one too, he then meets up with Samaya Schmidt, and interesting enough, so she's exiled too. He sees her, they connect. And then the grasses all of a sudden take on names, which I think is interesting at 378. So once he encounters another person, then the names he starts to go back into that of creation, of like maybe becoming more of like creating a society. So it's like the dead grasses. If I had been asked, I could have named some of them: Allwoods, Torfillion, Cursegrass, Sulfabouts, Garviandre, Twirlvanes, Ulbabian, Granzacels, Orphonge, Everfools, Ditch Crooks, and White Tartars.
This is actually one of two, like if you were to ask at the end, like you do, what are your two favorite lines or two favorite excerpts or your favorite, that was one of them. And thank you for reading those names, because I was nervous about read them.
Yeah. I have no problem being wrong.
To it. Like this, it is about the plants, but it's not at all about the plants. It's just about finding something that's familiar and not regretful.
Yeah, absolutely. That moves our characters out of, so they've been on trial, and now the two of them are out into the taiga as well, and sort of teamed up in a way, I guess, to move them. And then we flip back in 30 to Hanko Vogulian. We have a few chapters, I believe, in a row with her doing stuff, which is interesting. She is alone. She's been living there alone for centuries. And the last time that we talked about her, she referenced that that Solveig used to come and like invade her house and her mind and fuck with her there, and then he stopped some like 7 centuries before, and that this is like almost unnerving to her, like the absence of his thing. And this will come up, I don't think it's in this section, I think it's later, where she's like still afraid, has a sense of something bad's going to come, and that like lasting trauma shows up a few times in this section particularly. But this is where she goes and someone's there. Someone is like has been camping and came near her house and like kind of crossed her path. So she saw him, so she murders him and kills him, and goes and takes all of his stuff. And I thought one thing that stood out here is like on 381, it says the dates. She's taking out her diary and looked at the month began to write, and it says the dates were all made up. That is like in Dahlgren, the Samuel Delaney book, there's a newspaper in the city. I forget what the name, I think it's just the city, whatever it's called. That's like this crazy space that everyone goes into. But there's a guy there that produces a paper, but the paper's dates make no sense. They're just like out of order. So it'll be like Tuesday, March 13th, 1984. And they'll be like Friday, you know, April 27th, like 1902. Like none of the dates are in order. It's just like made up stuff. And it's like a recurring bit in that book. And that was the first thing that struck me in here. And then she goes through and does Friday, November 2nd, Saturday, November 3rd, Thursday, November 8th, which all map out. So they're just like made up, but they're made up because there is no humanity. There's no way, calendars don't mean anything if there's no society. And
Brian was saying in the last episode that you guys did that, you know, with regard to s07e08, that does he represent this godlike figure because he's outside of time, and like time is nothing for him, it's irrelevant to him, and now the rest of the characters are in this as well. So it really does seem like they're in hell, right? It seems like there's no time, there's no north or south, there are seasons, it seems like, but even those are a little confused.
Yeah.
And kind of run into each other and are out of order sometimes. But yeah, it definitely seems like they're out of space and time.
Yeah.
And they do lean in pretty hard a little bit later with talking about marionettes and, you know, having no control over your actual, like, there's no free will. There's no, like, everything's just determined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just a great little button on the end of that little writing in her journal or whatever. She finds a book of
that's my favorite line. I was going to mark it.
Go ahead. You can.
No, you read it. It was going to be my one for the end.
Oh, I'll save it then. We'll save it for the end. Sorry.
Okay. That's my favorite one.
382. Get prepared for a great line. Yeah.
It's a great line. Chapter 31 is back to like the typeface of s07e08's ramblings, his poetic thing. But this seems to be one that's written by Hanko about s07e08, and I don't know what to make of this. So it's for a specific reason. So this chapter, let me see if I can explain this. So I'll just read a couple of things I underlined, and maybe this will make sense. So on page 383-31, at the moment the flame stopped roaring, and perhaps a little later, several years later, because now and for a long while you haven't been calculating time the way you used to. For a long while you haven't cared about clocks and calendars. So this second you entered a place that had to be a black lake of tar and naphtha and blah, 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 blah. And then it goes on to like 384. So this goes into this you goes into the space, and then deep down your existence, though nicely organized by an iron ideology constantly soaked in the wellspring of black magic, blah, 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 you're disastrously muddled to the point that you ended, or rather you started, by confusing daughters, wives, and mistresses, simple crimes and massacres, proletarian morals and vile reveries, tyrants and prisoners, birth and death, and for some time you justified this difficult wayward trend by leaning on the bardic yet nebulous theory of canceling out opposites, of dissolving contradictions in an indeterminate and certainly a sometimes nightmarish, sometimes not, oneric mass. You refused the method that would have forced you to separate the narrative grain from the Baroque chaff, and you began declaiming, first as an introductory prayer, calling forth your secret henchmen, then creating by your mouth the shadows of those who had crossed your path or wandered by accident. You reincarnated yourself in the unkind figure of s07e08. And then it references the other henchmen, Eli Kronauer, a bunch of names I'm not going to pronounce, Maria Quell. So the thing I didn't get was like, the you and s07e08 seem to be two separate people at this point, but it's describing s07e08 and what he does and his like black magic and his world of like making no wives and mistresses are the same and all this stuff in the daughters. But like I didn't know how to process this one. And your guys' thoughts.
I know there's been several mentions of Bardo and Bardic within which, you know, it makes me think of somewhat of like, I guess the Western idea of purgatory, right? Where, because I'm trying to think, is Bardo, is that Tibetan?
There's various ones.
Buddhist, but I don't know. I'm not really good with the schools of Buddhism, but I believe it's Tibetan Buddhism.
The Tibetan Book of the Dead is what Bardo or not Bardo is based on. So one of his other books. So let's assume that he's using the Tibetan version of the Bardo and the stages that you go through when you're in the Bardo.
But do you go to the Bardo whether you're good or bad?
Yes. No matter what, when you die, you go to the Bardo.
And depending on like what you've done in your normal, I guess, in your life, depending on how you behaved or if you were good or bad, the length of your stay in Bardo, or is it?
No, the Bardo. So you go to the Bardo no matter what for 49 days. And while you're in there for 49 days, you're supposed to, on the outside in the world, that the physical world, someone's supposed to put like a picture of you there and chant or like help guide you through the Bardo and help guide you through the 49 days to your rebirth. And along the path, there's a certain number of stages that you go through. Like first is like when you first enter, there's a chance to go into the light, and people don't take that. And so they end up in the Bardo, and then they have to encounter like their exact opposite, their versions of themselves. And then it all merges into one. And then you are reborn based on like what you're desiring at that moment in time. So like there's one of the stories in Bardo or Not Bardo is great because like the guy goes through it all and he's like, I just don't want to be a fucking spider. I don't want to be a spider. As long as everybody's anything but a spider. And at the end, of course, is like, what are those figures? Those look really beautiful. That's gorgeous. And it's like 2 spiders. So he's reborn as like a spider. So you go through, but I forget what I remember this when we were doing the book, because I read the Book of the Dead, and it has like a sequence of like things that you go through and encounter, but it's always 49 days. Okay. Which is why I wondered if any of these numbers were ever like multiples of 49, but I haven't checked that. But
no, I mean, it just seems like much like it would be a key as to this weird space that people are in, and they come out of it just random, like, like I was in this dungeon, and one day the doors open and I walk through it, and now I'm in the I'm new and time has passed, and so like he's out of that bardic state now and back into reality, or you know what I mean? Like there's something like passing back and forth within this black oil of whatever they were.
Yeah, I was wondering like if this section was basically a higher meta. There's various planes of existence in this book. If this was one step further in like the metaphysics of this world, in which there's always an evil that's reborn over and over again through this black magic thing that can do whatever, and it's reborn as s07e, but it's always going to be there.
And it's her as well, because they say she has the same golden gaze, or what she has like that ability to control, or it's reborn with her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing too with this is we keep seeing, like, of all the names, for whatever reason, Maria Qual keeps popping out to me over and over and over and over again. I keep noticing that of all of the made up names we're getting, and she's in this part too.
Yep, she is like the biggest figure. I didn't look, but I wonder if he's written any books under that name or anything. But yeah, I'm not sure.
The length of your sulking barely matters to us. Your sulking or ours doesn't matter.
Do you guys? You know what? Next time we find a date or a number, let me know, because chapter 32 moves on to her writing. And it's like, there's no moon for 1,000 years. And it's like 49 days passed in 343. 343 is 49 times 7. So the 49 is repeated there.
Yeah. No,
then we have to count groups of years and centuries.
Yeah.
And this seems to be like that kind of rebirthing thing. We're pummeled by s07e, unknown henchmen, daughters. Sometimes they come out in the open air. This is her like sort of describing her own biography. I didn't have much to say about this, since there's like a bunch of stuff coming with that we probably should get through too. But I don't know if you guys had any comments.
No, I'm fine to push on if you are. 33
and 34 are where the real shit hits the fan. So Hanko are doing her best not to be dead or alive. She all of a sudden has this sense of dread. Then it's the dread that she used to always have when s07e entered her dreams instead of private memories. This horrible impression had just arisen again in her without warning, and with the force intensified by its unexpectedness. And this is one of the things I sort of mentioned in trying to put together what we'd probably talk about today, is like, this is that PTSD never leaving. That it's impossible to like for her to get past that. And so since she does see someone, and what it turns out to be is her sister, Samaya, who she then just shoots. Like just caps her. And especially because Samaya's like, Hanko Bagulian, queen of the whores, you slept with s07e. Every night you slept with your father. and so then she shoots her, fires a bullet, go back to where you came from, you shithead. And then all of a sudden there's no longer a single fragment of glass on the ground. The shattered window was intact again. And then in her diary, she references that she dreamt about it and that was a dream. And like, she doesn't know 7 or 8 centuries have gone by. Nobody left to remember Radiant Terminus or the Second Soviet Union. Nostalgic for all that. So suddenly, like, there's like those things are so weirdly tied. So you got the trauma, the sort of the abuse that's gone on. Caesar's sister, who abuses her and claims that she's, you know, incestuous relationship with her father, shoots her and is like, man, remember Radiant Terminus?
Those were the good old
those were the good old days. Remember when we had that?
I circled both the nostalgics because I thought maybe it's my Western brain, but I find it very interesting, especially when reading things from Eastern Bloc countries. Like there's still some nostalgia for just the terrible, shitty, great times. Like you can't get away from those thoughts of nostalgia. You think, how can you be nostalgic for that? Like you just did 300 pages about how awful it is, but yet there's still nostalgia.
I feel like I told this story on this podcast, but the first time I went to Estonia, I met this woman who was like, the Soviet times were bad, but she's like, but at the same time, we didn't have to work all the time. Like we read, we did things, we enjoyed our lives differently. And like, now we're just feel this pressure the capitalist pressure to like continually be working, continually be doing things for like, to advance, to get better, to progress. And like, at that point in time, it was like, yeah, you know, we do our little part. We all live okay. But then again, Russians kind of fucked that all up by murdering so many people. Doesn't help. Like, it'd all be great if you just don't go and fucking murder everyone. Like, none of that. It's kind of like Anthony's perspective on cults would be great if you just leave out all the crazy sex part. They just can't get away from it. 34 goes back to then Cronauer and Samaya, and they're sort of walking and don't talk to each other forever. And this is, I think, what you're talking about, Brian, where it's like, what if we were still one of Solovey's puppets, neither alive nor dead, within one of Solovey's dreams? An unbearable thought. He pushed it away as he wrinkled his nose. He smelled once again what wafted towards him. And then the crazy thing on 396 where Samaya moves her brain.
Here's my bullet holes.
And there's bullet holes, which are from like the dream that Hanko just had, I assume. So again, we're stuck in this world in which you can get shot and not die, or be reborn, but like dreams and reality are intermingled in ways. It might all be in Solovey's dreams. And she references that thing of she has her father's magical eyes. So there we are.
She hits the spot she wants down to the millimeter, even in darkness. She's a bitch, a perfect copy of her father. He lives in her.
It's like so intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like, you know, I have read up until this point, but do we have evidence that they had a fraught relationship before this? Because
Samaya and Hanko?
Yeah.
No.
Right. There's like one sentence in 33 where Hanko is saying, "Oh, I always hated her," and it's this sort of relationship that's established between them and the history of them in this one sentence that, like, okay, all right, like she's shooting her and I don't know why. And
you know, it sort of like tracks.
PTSD.
Yeah, what tracks for me is like they were both sexually abused by their father, and I feel like that sets up a situation in which they just both wouldn't actually hate each other. Like it's such a divisive thing, like making you seem so alone and like and vulnerable, and that like if he's showing preference towards one or the other, like if they have that sort of like I don't know how to articulate it without being like weird or like putting a lot of stuff on there, but like just a sense of like that trauma and that emotion, like I could see it just playing out that way. That like
that makes a lot of sense actually, and that's kind of like what happens in the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. I think it is, right? Like the one sister leaves the other behind or something, and they're both abused by their father and they hate each other. Yeah, so that's
and like Samaya tried to overthrow her father, and Hanko tried to escape and didn't help her. Like there's like reasons to see that, but like having that single abusive figurehead would seem to like it would divide a family that way.
I believe in this line, he visits her. When he's in her, there's no difference between him and her.
Yeah.
And so if she's willing to, you know, go Dark Phoenix and like blow up the whole place to and ram a, you know, rod through her father's head, she's willing to, you know, scream at her sister. Like if she thinks her sister is her father, that same anger.
And I mean, her sister Hanko is like leading her own little, not a commune, but her own space and not allowing anyone else in there. She shoots that guy and steals all of his shit. Like that's not particularly good. like sort of like what her father did. then going on, like 35 is part of your seasons. Of the 4 seasons, only fall was agreeable. The ground hardened, which made walking easier. The flying insects became rarer and rarer. There's less suffering than in winter. So telling a little bit about that, going through all the years, and he's remembering his wife, Irina Echegoyan, and like of how she was the one that when she had cancer was attacked by the people they murdered and raped her. And then he's like, we got some of them, but I don't know if it was them or not. And like then the like standalone paragraph line that's like pretty emotional core of I am nothing anymore and I miss you. But this seemed to be sort of like what you were talking about too, of the like his grief for her and all of that. Pretty intense section. Then we get another one that we can just kind of skim through is another one of like the raving ones. Curtain of bloods, curtain of flames, absolute darkness, absolute oblivion, absolute knowledge. Like I really want an AWP. I want to just read one of these as if it's a real poem at some bar reading.
If we can do it in
poem. Curtain of blood, curtains of flame.
If you could do this in post, put on some like death metal music. Curtains of blood, curtains of flame, absolute darkness, absolute oblivion.
Yes. Someone should make that a song. I would play that at
These are some killer black metal lyrics.
They really are. You pull back the feathers that extend your wings. You pull back the wandering souls. The drum beats in you is not a heart. It is a drum. It is not a drum. It is the horrible pestle of the world and of hells. Nothing exists.
And then there's the guitar solo after that. Yeah.
I wonder if I could find some like generic black or like sludge rock and like do this over top of that. I have other work I should be doing. But oh, anyways, yeah, that's his bit.
The marionettes thing are really big on the next page on that, right? The tempest, the storms, the marionettes.
Yeah.
Yep. And that comes on 410. Our best marionettes, I said again in a muffled voice. So they're all Cronauers. They've got their little campfire. He's thinking about his comrades, missing things. There's a bit more nostalgia in this section. And then he can't even remember all the names of the people. So it's all sort of fading away. So there's something that runs throughout here of a different, before we get to the most insane section, there's a different sort of trend in this of like, Hanko's trying to preserve things by writing her father's words and creating her diary and those texts and has that moment of nostalgia. He's trying to remember everyone and remember his wife and remember things because there's that nostalgia for those times. So there's some idea of like, how do things get passed along? How do things remain in a world like this that's been completely destroyed multiple times? It's interesting. But final section, 38, Miriam Umarik. We haven't seen her in a long time. She's the third daughter. Shortly after, and this is where she explains what happens, that they had fled, her and Barguzin, her husband, had fled Radiant Terminus because they had become unlivable. Shortly after the massacre, which is the night of Cronauer running amok, the provisional nuclear power plant had exploded in the Soviet basement, and the accident had ended the energy and hot water supply. And so she leaves, they go off and they're living alone in this place and they see a caravan of peddlers and man, this part is fucked up. So they see these people coming, she let them approach. So unlike Hanko, who's like, if I see someone, I kill them.
Murder them.
Everyone's bad. Fuck them. There she's like, lets them approach and goes and talks to them. The conversation began. There were salvagers as well as peddlers. They scoured ruins and were looking for a refugee camp or work camp to unload treasures and products. And she's like, oh, there's nothing like that here. And they're like, what do you do here, basically? And she's like, oh, I'm from the second Soviet Union. Like, with my husband, we watch for trouble. Even in the most distant corners, the supreme law of the proletarian revolution reigns. Here we warn, like, this is so diluted. Here we
alert the authorities to hooligans, suspects, and partisans of capitalism.
Like, 3 men laughed through their beards. Then they tied her up. One of them went inside the hut to see whether the husband she had mentioned could pose a problem. Then he came back to say that he was harmless. They raped her. So yeah, so she's like, yeah, we report all bad things. And they're like, ha, 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 ha. We're going to just destroy you physically. Good. And that's the end. But as I was saying before we got this started, like I meant to bring in the copy of The Road that I have at home and I forgot it because I haven't read it in so long. But my memory of not liking the ending of that book is that it's so bleak and so nihilistic for so long, and there's no hope, and people are generally bad. And then the dad dies, and like the kid's left alone. The perspective switches to the kid's perspective, and there's a group of people come out of the woods and they're like, "Hey, it's cool, come with us." Like, and there's like at least an implication that it's positive and that there is like a rebuilding, a community rebuilding. And
then they ate him.
Fucking
yeah, definitely ate him. Yeah.
They have to have ate him. But it should have been. I wanted to go back and look and see how much of it was like my assuming that it was a positive ending, or what was actually in the text there. I haven't read it in 12 years or whatever. But I wish that it ended sort of like this, where it was like bleak and like, no, these people, yeah, they come out, they grab the kid, and they eat him.
You know why it ends up with an up ending?
Because people want that.
No, he wrote that with his son.
Oh.
Yeah, so you're not going to eat or rape his. He's not going to eat or rape his son, so that's why it ends that's why it ends happy.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's false for.
I'm going to write a book with my son, a post-apocalyptic book with my son, where he gets eaten at the
end. Sorry about your luck. That's the way of the world. Should have murdered the strangers.
That's what happened. Yeah. I'm not going to lie to him like that. I'm not going to lie to him.
You don't get tied up if you murder people first.
This book should be. We should have marketed this as like a handbook for the coming apocalypse. Like as everything falls apart, like there's certain rules you need to live by. Never
like a prepper book.
Yeah, prepper book. We should. Oh shit, man, we could get the preppers community in on this. Like, don't trust people. You know, talk to your core, because the core will keep you warm.
The core will keep you warm.
How to feed your core, chapter 4. Yeah,
how to feed your core.
Feeding.
We could get the prepper community, which is also maybe related to like the fitness community. The whatchamacallit, what are those people? The hardcore, like Greg Underwood's fans. You know, the
Radiant Terminus fashion guide. It's different wigs for when all your hair comes out because of the plutonium.
Yeah,
all right.
That's true.
Yeah.
So this taiga sheet will help you get through the grasses without any of those scratchy.
Yeah, identifying plants in the post-apocalyptic landscape.
Everything not edible, not edible, not edible. Like every single.
Oh man. Well, do you guys have?
If it's growing, it's poisonous. That's everything.
Exactly. Do you have a favorite line that you want to share, or do you want me to do mine while you guys look for yours?
I'm gonna look for mine real quick. I had a backup because the one that you read earlier was my favorite at the end of 29.
Oh yeah. Brian almost stole mine, but now cannot find 382. Yeah. So when Hanko kills the guy and goes to his camp and takes all the stuff, she found all the various things, including like an army lighter, baits for traps, cords, also half a book, no cover, no title, post-exotic Narax, read 2 or 3, total garbage, good for starting a fire.
So
absolutely wild.
This comes up a lot with like books that are garbage or are like good for starting a fire. There was another one, just is on page 400 about, you know, Grandma Odgul and her, like how some books are just not good, and there's a lot of talk about socialist realism throughout the book, and I feel like Volodine's trying to say something about, you know, not all books are created equally, and there's a lot of shit books out there.
That's newsflash.
Yeah. Are we allowed to say that? Are we allowed to say that there's a lot of shit books out there?
There are a lot of shit books out there, man.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite line?
My backup after the one at the end of chapter 29 where he's kind of renaming plants, and the way that he kind of renames his old comrades too. I liked that a lot. We'd read that before though. My backup is the one sentence on 400. I am nothing anymore and I miss you. I know it's kind of an easy go-to, but I don't know. It's just very simple and just kind of reminds me of that really impactful, you know, and Jesus wept. You know, just a very simple, heavy sentence.
And it does go back to like the main theme we've been talking about of like how like the connection between like people and like this connection has been severed for him. And like he's nothing and Mr. It's like it's very intense. Because every once in a while, like this hits like a real emotional core amid like all the comic book craziness of it.
Yeah, yeah.
How about you, Brian?
All right, I'm at 1% on my back.
Brian is gone. Brian said he was at 1% on his battery on his computer, and then it was about to go out. So he is lineless this week, which is fine. So, anyways, I guess we could just wrap up here. So I got to get to another meeting. But thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun.
And next week we'll be doing the last sections of the books. It's like the last 50 pages, 416 through 468. So we'll see how everything wraps up. We're going to revisit those 2 articles they wrote about post-exoticism, just to see how that relates to here and sort of now have a better perspective on kind of recapping it. And we'll do that next Wednesday morning. And then we've announced it before, but the 8th season will start sometime in mid-April and will feature Schoen's Codex 1962. We'll have more information about that on the website on 3%, which you should visit regularly and read all the articles on there, because there's some of them that are pretty fun, such as the one in which we call for people to nominate their International Hall of Fame writers, which everyone should get on, do that. Rachel's responsible in part for this whole post and idea. So go read that, pick some names, name some people. And also you can follow us on Twitter at @open_letter or at Chad W Post. And Rachel, what's your Twitter?
Oh, no_sobriquet.
Oh, yeah. That's right. And which you can go find that. I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Cool. Other than that, everyone take care. You can still buy Radiant Terminus through our website. Use 2 month at the 2-month review, or no, is it just 2 months? I forget what the code is. Whatever, there's a code, you'll find it. Who cares? Have fun, buy some books, read some books, talk about post-apocalyptic worlds, and we'll be back next week.